My name is Rowan. For the last 3 years, the quiet rhythm of Port Blossom has been the metronome of my healing. I live in a small apartment above a bookstore, where the scent of aging paper and brewing coffee mingles with the damp, evergreen-scented air that drifts in from the Puget Sound. I love the way the mist clings to the ferns in the morning and how the fairies glide across the water like silent, gentle giants. Here, I have learned to measure my life not in pounds or followers, but in moments of peace, the warmth of a mug in my hands, the satisfaction of a long hike through the Cascades, the quiet joy of rediscovering my own appetite, my own desires, my own self. This peace was a hard-won territory, reclaimed from a childhood that was anything but gentle. My mother, Isabel, always said that food was her love language. When I was a child, I believed her. Her love felt like extra servings of creamy pasta, thick slices of buttery toast, and milkshakes so rich they coated your tongue for hours. My older sister, Clara, and I were her beloved projects. I remember the pride in her eyes as she watched us eat, the way she'd hum a little tune as she recorded our weights in a floral-patterned ledger. She called us her healthy, happy girls. I was 12, short for my age and nearly 200 pounds, when the language of love changed overnight. Clara, just a year older, was heavier still. One evening, Isabel gathered us at the dining room table, her face arranged in an expression of grave concern. She announced we were embarking on a family wellness journey. Before we could ask what that meant, she propped her phone on a stack of books and pressed record. The feasts of love were replaced by rations of fear. Our lives, once private and insular, were suddenly broadcast for public consumption on her burgeoning Aurasphere channel, Nourish with Isabel. Isabel was brilliant in her cruelty. She understood the power of a dramatic transformation. The more we had to lose, the more compelling our story would be. Our hunger became her content, our tears her emotional engagement. I was always the more defiant one, a thistle in her manicured garden. I learned to hide apple cores in my textbook and sneak spoonfuls of peanut butter in the dead of night. I lost weight, but on my own terms, slowly and resentfully. Clara, however, became her star pupil. She was more fragile, more eager for the warmth of our mother's approval, a warmth that had become conditional on her compliance. The day Clara fainted during a live-streamed workout was a turning point. She was hospitalized for dehydration and malnutrition, and in the week she was gone, she lost 15 pounds. Isabel was ecstatic. She bought Clara a new laptop, calling her an inspiration to her thousands of followers. She threw a victory party, complete with balloons and a cake Clara wasn't allowed to eat, to celebrate 50,000 followers. The photo she posted showed Clara, pale and gaunt, smiling weakly from her hospital bed, and 4 lines snaking from her arm. The caption read, "My warrior. Nothing can stop her from reaching her goals." I tried to earn her love in other ways. I taught myself how to edit her videos, making the cuts sharper, the music more poignant. I researched hashtag strategies and grew her account by hundreds of thousands. I became her unpaid producer, photographer, and social media manager. It was never enough. "Sweetheart, I appreciate the help," she'd say, her voice a careful blend of encouragement and disappointment, "but what would really help is if you'd stop sabotaging your progress. Look at your sister. That's commitment." I worried about Clara constantly, but she was my older sister. I clung to the belief that she was stronger than me, that she had some hidden reserve of strength I couldn't see. That belief shattered the day I came home from school to find her crumpled on the bathroom floor, an empty bottle of laxatives beside her. Her skin was ashen, her lips tinged with blue. I knelt, my heart hammering against my ribs, and reached to check her pulse, my fingers trembling. She flinched, pushing my hand away with a surprising surge of strength. "Don't," she whispered, her voice raspy. "I'm so bloated today. Mom says if I can lose 10 more pounds this week, we might get a sponsorship with a wellness brand." That was the moment the fog cleared. It wasn't just about love or approval anymore. My sister was a hostage, and my mother was her captor. I gave in. I swallowed the strange, bitter pills she handed me. I let her fill me on the treadmill, my vision swimming with black spots after 2 hours of cardio on nothing but a handful of steamed vegetables. I smiled for the before and after photos, the ones she captioned with saccharine praise for my dedication, even as my body screamed in protest. I thought that if I became sick enough, fragile enough, she would finally see me, the daughter, and not the project. I was wrong. For college, I chose a small liberal arts school on the other side of the country, a place of rolling hills and seasons that turned with a gentle, predictable grace. I blocked her number, deleted my social media, and found a therapist named Dr. Anya, a kind woman with wise eyes who taught me that food was not a moral failing and that my body was not a battlefield. For the first time in my life, I went to the gym to feel strong, not to become small. I learned to cook for pleasure, to savor the taste of a ripe peach, to trust the signals of my own body. I was building a life. 3 years passed. 3 years of quiet, steady healing. Then a call from an unknown number. It was my mother. Her voice, thick with a practiced, tearful urgency, begged me to come home for Thanksgiving. I gave her a dozen excuses, my voice colder and firmer than I thought possible. But then she played her final card. "It's Clara," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She's not doing well. She needs her family, Rowan. She needs you." The love I had for my sister was the one string she could still pull, and it snapped me back across the country. I should have known better. The moment I walked through the door of our childhood home, the familiar scent of lemon polish and old secrets hit me. And I saw them. The ring lights, the tripods, the cameras perched like vultures in every corner of the living room. Clara was there, curled on the sofa. She looked like a ghost draped in expensive knitwear, her face a skeletal mask of foundation and veneers. She couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds. My mother descended upon me, her eyes sweeping over my body with a look of pure disgust. My healthy, strong body, the one I had worked so hard to reclaim, was, in her eyes, a catastrophic failure. "How could you let yourself get so big again?" she hissed, pinching the flesh of my arm between her perfectly manicured fingers. "You've ruined everything we built. You ungrateful child." Before I could form a response, before I could even process the venom in her voice, she moved with a terrifying speed. She pulled a syringe from her designer handbag, the needle glinting under the glare of the ring lights. I tried to back away, but Clara was suddenly behind me, her bony hands gripping my arms with a strength that belied her frail frame. "She's helping you," Clara chanted, her voice a hollow echo. "Why can't you see she's just trying to help you?" My mother's face was a mask of righteous determination. "It's just a vitamin boost, sweetie," she said, her voice soothing and utterly false, as she plunged the needle deep into my thigh. "A little B12. You'll thank me when you're beautiful again." A fire spread through my leg, hot and chemical. My heart began to pound, a frantic, desperate drum against my ribs. The room tilted, the edges of my vision blurring into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. As I crumpled to the floor, my body starting to convulse, the last thing I saw was my mother, adjusting the focus on her camera, her voice over voice already starting. "Sometimes," she murmured, her face a perfect portrait of maternal concern for her audience, "a breakthrough requires a breakdown." I woke up 2 days later in a hospital bed, the sterile white ceiling swimming into focus. A doctor with tired, kind eyes explained that my kidneys had failed. The substance Isabel had injected me with was a black market metabolic accelerator, a compound so potent it had nearly shut my body down completely. He told me I was lucky. 5 more minutes, he said, and I would have been gone. They also told me who had called 911. It was Clara. In the end, some small, buried part of my sister had fought its way to the surface. And as I lay there, tethered to machines that were keeping me alive, a new kind of resolve hardened within me. My mother had profited from our pain for the last time. I was going to make her pay. The hospital room felt like a stage, and my mother was its director. As I lay tangled in tubes and wires, my body aching with a profound cellular exhaustion, Isabel orchestrated the narrative with the precision of a seasoned producer. My hands trembled, a side effect of the kidney damage and the potent medications, as I tried to explain to the detective what had happened. The words came out thick and slurred, a poor translation of the horror in my mind. Through the glass panel of the door, I could see my mother pacing the hallway, her phone pressed to her ear, her face a mask of practiced anguish for whatever relative was on the other end of the line. The detective, a man with a weary face and a well-worn notepad, listened patiently, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. A resident bustled in, checked my chart, and scribbled a note I caught upside down, patient agitated. Isabel swept into the room just as the detective was closing his notepad. Tears streamed down her face as she rushed to my bedside, smoothing my hair back, her touch a proprietary brand of comfort. She was magnificent in her performance. She told the detective about my history, my struggles since leaving for college, my supposed tendency towards self-harm. Her voice trembled with the same authentic-sounding sorrow she had perfected for her Aurasphere confessionals. The detective excused himself. Instantly, Isabel's mask dropped. She leaned over me, her gaze sharp and clinical as she inspected my bag, her fingers tracing the tubing. When a nurse entered with discharge papers, Isabel intercepted her, insisting she needed to take me home immediately to provide the proper care I so clearly needed. I tried to protest, but the effort sent a spike of pain through my side, and my voice was a mere croak. A social worker arrived, needing insurance information to extend Clara's psychiatric hold. Isabel's eyes lit up. Leverage. She promised to provide everything, but first, she had some serious concerns about my own mental state. I listened, trapped in the bed, as she wove a tapestry of lies, each thread carefully chosen to discredit me. She spoke of my obsessive behavior around food in college, my dramatic decision to cut off contact, my alarming weight gain. The social worker nodded sympathetically, taking notes. My recovery was being reframed as a relapse. My boundaries were being painted as pathology. When the detective returned to ask about the syringe, Isabel explained calmly that she had disposed of it in a medical waste bin, as any responsible person would. It was just a B12 complex, she insisted, purchased from a local wellness boutique to help with my obvious fatigue. He asked for a receipt. She promised to find the email. My own words, when I managed to force them out, she tried to poison me, sounded like the ravings of a confused, unstable patient. The detective's expression softened from suspicion to pity. That was worse. The hours bled into one another in a blur of beeping machines and hushed hallway consultations. The family began to arrive, summoned by Isabel. My aunt, my cousins, my mother's sister from out of town. I heard her in the corridor, her voice low and mournful, telling them I'd had a stress-induced breakdown, that I was crying out for attention. I was faced with an impossible choice. The detective was still in the building, and I could give my full statement, slurred and confused as it might be. Or I could be there for Clara's intake evaluation, which was happening in the psychiatric wing. Isabel knew I would choose my sister. She had built her entire strategy around my love for Clara. Against the nurse's advice, I disconnected my and, leaning heavily on the rolling stand, made my way down the long, sterile hallway. My legs felt like they were made of cotton. Isabel followed at a distance, allowing the staff to see me stumble, to witness my apparent instability. Clara sat in a small, beige room, looking tinier than ever. When the psychiatrist asked about the injection, she glanced at my mother, who stood just outside the glass, and mumbled that it was just vitamins, that Mom was really into wellness. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, as if she were reading from a script. I pressed my hand against the cool glass, my heart aching. I was watching my sister lie to protect the very person who had orchestrated our destruction. The intake took 3 hours. 3 hours Isabel used to solidify her narrative. By the time I returned to my room, it was full of relatives. They surrounded my bed with concerned faces, their questions gentle but probing. My aunt reminded everyone of the time in high school I'd accused Mom of reading my diary. She's always been so sensitive, she said, her tone meant to be kind, but the implication was clear. I was prone to exaggeration, to drama. Isabel's phone was a constant buzz of notifications. She showed a cousin her Aurasphere page, now filled with posts about supporting a child through a mental health crisis. There were photos of the hospital exterior, captioned with musings on unconditional love and the struggles of modern parenting. There was no mention of a syringe, no hint of violence. When I tried to comment from my own phone, to tell the truth, my words were deleted in seconds. Then I was blocked. A flood of messages from her followers filled my inbox, calling me ungrateful, selfish, a monster for what I was putting my poor mother through. The architecture of my mother's control was intricate and absolute. She controlled the health insurance that was paying for my bed. She had all of Clara's medical passwords from years of being her designated caregiver. Every emergency contact form listed her name first. I realized with a growing, cold horror how systematically she had isolated us, not just from the world, but from each other. That evening, my father finally replied to my frantic texts. He offered to pay for a week in a hotel. Nothing more. His new wife, he explained, didn't want the drama. The man who had walked away and left us in Isabel's care years ago was walking away again. I was on my own. The whispers from the hospital staff confirmed my isolation. The family with the eating disorder daughters, I heard one nurse say to another. Such a dedicated mother. It's a tragic situation. The detective called back. The local wellness boutique did, in fact, sell B12 injection kits. It didn't matter that Isabel had never purchased one there. The mere existence of a plausible alternative was enough to seed doubt. My best friend from college texted, asking if I was okay. She'd seen my mother's posts. Then, sheepishly, she admitted she sometimes used my mom's recipes. Some of them are actually really good, she wrote. Even my own friends were part of her audience. The final, crushing blow came when Isabel's phone lit up with a notification she made sure I saw. It was a screenshot of a text exchange between us from 6 months prior, where I had, in a moment of weakness, asked for her advice on losing a few pounds I'd gained. Out of context, it looked like I was begging for the very intervention that had landed me here. She had already forwarded it to the detective. The hospital room was no longer a place of healing. It was a prison where my reality was being dismantled, piece by piece, by the woman who had given me life and then tried to take it away. 3 years of freedom, of therapy, of carefully rebuilt self-worth, were crumbling under the weight of her campaign. Everything now depended on Clara. And Clara was locked in a psychiatric ward where her only approved visitor was our mother. The fluorescent lights of the hospital hummed a monotonous tune, a soundtrack to my slow, dawning realization that the fight for truth would be a war of attrition. The next morning, my ex-boyfriend, James, appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. My stomach plummeted. She had gotten to him, too. Isabel rushed to greet him, taking the cup he offered her, touching his arm in a gesture of shared, weary concern. I watched them confer near the nurse's station, their hushed tones and his pitying glances toward me confirming that he, too, had been absorbed into her narrative. The detectives returned, this time with a colleague. They had reviewed the hospital's security footage. It showed Isabel disposing of something in a medical waste bin, but the image was too grainy to be conclusive. They asked me why a nurse had reported me saying, "I want to make her pay." Isabel's eyes widened in flawless, feigned shock. She hadn't known I harbored such violent thoughts. The narrative of the vengeful, unstable daughter gained another layer. My past was being weaponized against me. Someone had unearthed my long-deleted teenage social media accounts. Screenshots circulated of posts I had been forced to write at 15, praising my mother for helping me transform my life. The date stamps corresponded with the height of our starvation, but without that context, they read as heartfelt gratitude. Through the hospital's online family portal, I could see the notes from Clara's group therapy sessions. My mother, of course, had access as well. One entry, written by a therapist, documented Clara saying she felt I had always resented the attention her illness garnered. The phrasing was too polished, too much like Isabel's own psychobabble, but it was now part of Clara's official record. That evening, a sliver of opportunity. Isabel, exhausted from her performance, left her tablet on the bedside table while she went to the cafeteria. My fingers, still trembling, flew across the screen. Her search history was a chilling chronicle of intent: safe dosage clenbuterol, black market diet supplements, legal gray area, daughter weight gain concern. The searches went back months, long before she had called me home. This wasn't an impulse, it was a premeditated attack. I quickly downloaded everything I could to a secure cloud drive: old videos, receipts from obscure international suppliers, messages with other fitness influencers about her transformation project with her daughters. But it wasn't enough. I needed more than circumstantial evidence. My grandmother arrived from Florida, a whirlwind of perfume and concern. She offered me her garage apartment, a place to land, but her offer came with conditions: no family drama, no upsetting the younger cousins, no posting about this unfortunate situation online. It was shelter, but it came at the price of my silence. The fight was costing me everything. I missed a crucial follow-up with a nephrologist to meet with a lawyer. My kidney function was worsening, but I couldn't stop. The non-compliance was noted in my medical record, another black mark against my credibility. My savings evaporated, spent on legal consultations and hotel rooms for the nights I couldn't bear my grandmother's quiet judgment. Meanwhile, Isabel launched a new series on Aurasphere, Healing of Family in Crisis. It was her most popular content yet. She had monetized our destruction. My remote tech job, the symbol of my independence, put me on performance probation. I couldn't focus on data analytics while my life was falling apart. My supervisor, a kind but firm woman, suggested I take unpaid leave to deal with my personal issues. One afternoon at the gym, my one remaining sanctuary, I saw a man I recognized from the invoices on Isabel's tablet. He was one of her supplement suppliers. My heart pounded as I approached him, feigning interest in his products. He boasted about his custom blends, winking as he mentioned they weren't exactly FDA approved, but were very popular with serious competitors. He remembered my mother. One of my best clients, he said proudly. Always asking about maximum effective dosages. She's serious about her girl's health. The pieces were clicking into place, but the picture they formed was horrifyingly complex. In a folder deep within Isabel's cloud storage, I found videos I'd never seen before. Clips of her genuinely trying to help a teenage Clara, coaxing her to eat a spoonful of yogurt, holding her hair back as she purged, her face streaked with what looked like real tears. I saw messages to her own therapist years ago, expressing a deep-seated fear that her daughters would end up like her, overweight, abandoned, and alone. Her motivation wasn't pure evil. It was a monstrous knot of her own trauma, financial desperation after my father left, and a fanatical belief that she was saving us. She genuinely believed control was a form of care. Understanding her didn't excuse her. It just made the path forward more painful. To prove a pattern of abuse, I had to betray my sister's privacy. I submitted Clara's entire medical history to my lawyer, every hospitalization, every therapist's note, every secret she had ever trusted me with. The protective sister I had once been was being sacrificed for the sake of justice. The truth had a strange, isolating quality. I had to admit my own complicity, that I had edited the videos, that I had researched the hashtags, that I had, in my desperation for her love, enabled the very system that nearly killed me. The admission was necessary for my own integrity, but in the eyes of others, it made me look like a participant, not just a victim. Isabel's overconfidence became her undoing. The day I was in the ICU, her life hanging in the balance, she had posted a story on Aurasphere about the necessity of tough love in parenting. The timestamp was irrefutable. She knew how gravely ill I was, and her first instinct was to create content. I presented the mountain of evidence to the detectives, this time with my lawyer present. I laid it all out: the search history, the supplier invoices, the private messages, the videos, the time-stamped post. I didn't editorialize. I let the pattern speak for itself. The lead detective's expression slowly changed from weary skepticism to dawning horror. This was far more than a family dispute. The district attorney's office took the case, framing it not as attempted murder, but as reckless endangerment and unlawful administration of a controlled substance. It was a less dramatic charge, but it was one they were confident they could prove. As Clara's discharge from the psychiatric facility approached, we all braced for her testimony. The family had fractured completely. My aunt called me, begging me to drop the charges for Clara's sake. She needs peace to recover, she pleaded, not a war. But I knew peace was impossible under our mother's rule. Some bridges have to be burned to save the people on the other side. Everything hinged on Clara. On whether, after a lifetime of conditioning, she could find the courage to speak her own truth, not the one our mother had written for her. The family meeting room at the treatment center was suffocatingly quiet. Isabel sat on one side of the table, flanked by her sister and a cousin, a small phalanx of support. I sat alone on the other. Clara was brought in by her caseworker, and she took the seat at the head of the table, looking like a judge about to preside over the wreckage of her own life. When the therapist asked her to describe what happened on the day I came home, Clara's gaze drifted to the window. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Isabel leaned forward slightly, a barely perceptible movement, her eyes fixed on her daughter. Clara took a small, shuddering breath. "My mother," she began, her voice barely a whisper, but clear and steady in the silent room, "has been giving me substances to lose weight for years." That day, she did the same thing to my sister. It was not a dramatic outburst, but a quiet statement of fact. And in that moment, the entire foundation of Isabel's narrative crumbled into dust. In court, it was a cascade. The toxicology reports. The supplier's testimony. Catherine, my mother's former assistant, tearfully admitting on the stand that she had been ordered to edit out moments in videos where Clara or I looked too sick. The final piece was Isabel's own court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, which diagnosed her with a severe personality disorder characterized by a pathological need for control and a complete inability to distinguish her own emotional needs from those of her children. During her sentencing, my mother finally broke down, not with remorse, but with a raw, bewildered grief. "I was trying to save them," she sobbed, her words directed at the judge, at the court, at a world she could no longer control. "I didn't want them to be like me." I stood to read my victim impact statement. My voice shook, but my words were my own. I spoke of the years of manipulation, of the permanent damage to my health. But I also spoke of the frightened, lonely woman at the heart of the monster, the mother who had twisted love into something unrecognizable. I did not ask for prison time. I asked for mandatory, long-term mental health treatment and a strict, permanent restraining order. I asked for a chance for all three of us to heal, separately. The judge's sentence was a reflection of the case's tragic complexity. 2 years of probation with intensive, court-mandated therapy. The permanent loss of her social media platforms, and a restraining order that prohibited her from any unsupervised contact with Clara or me. Justice, it turned out, was not about revenge. It was about breaking a cycle. The aftermath was not an ending, but a new, quiet beginning. The extended family remains fractured, a constellation of resentments and awkward silences. Some holidays I spend with my grandmother. Others, with the chosen family I have slowly built, friends who understand that healing is not a straight line. My kidneys will never fully recover. I live with the daily reality of medication, dietary restrictions, and the knowledge that my mother's actions have irrevocably altered the course of my physical life. But my spirit, the part of me that she could never quite extinguish, is my own. 6 months after the trial, Clara and I met for coffee. It was our first time alone together, without therapists or lawyers. She looked healthier, the light returning to her eyes. She was enrolled in an art therapy program and was living in a supported transitional home. We didn't talk about our mother, or the trial, or the weight we had lost and gained. We talked about a book she was reading. I told her about a remote job I had found, writing for a small environmental nonprofit. She ordered a latte with whole milk and a pastry. As she took a bite, she met my eyes across the table and gave me a small, real smile. It wasn't a Hollywood ending. There was no grand reconciliation, no tearful embrace that erased the years of pain. But in that small cafe, amidst the scent of coffee and rain, 2 sisters were beginning to learn a new language, not of love defined by control, but of a quiet, resilient survival. And for now, that was more than enough. It was everything.